So there's performance royalties and mechanical royalties. Those are the two real main ones. There's also a third one that's becoming more and more relevant. It's called micro sync.
Peace, what's going down? It's DJ Payne 1. Royalty collection, publishing, everything that comes with that is one of the most confusing and misunderstood parts of the music business. And a lot of people ask me to dive into that pool. And what I'm doing instead is getting someone who's much more qualified than I am to answer a lot of these questions. So I'd like to welcome CJ from Song Trust. Thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So let's get right into it. So when a song is played via broadcast, performed, streamed, licensed, sold, royalties are generated for the creators involved in making that song. But there are so many types of royalties out there to collect, and oftentimes musicians either don't know that these multiple royalties exist, or they don't know how to collect them, or they don't know what the difference between all of them are. So just to get started, what are some of the main types of royalties that music makers should be aware of?
Yeah, so there's really two main royalty streams that really they break down into, but based on, where the music's being consumed, it will generate it in different ways. So there's performance royalties and mechanical royalties. Those are the two real main ones. There's also a third one that's becoming more and more relevant. It's called micro sync. Micro sync is basically the royalties that are generated off of the use of music on videos like within YouTube. So those are pretty much the three main ones. But yeah, performance is going to be generated off of the public performance of your work. So if you think of like your music being played at a bar or at an airport, or really anyone doing a cover of your song live, or even you playing your song live, that's going to generate the performance. The mechanical is considered a reproduction of the work. So if you think of, for instance, if there's a digital download of your song, or if a copy is being made of it, or even if it's streamed, that's not the original song. When you're streaming it, it's the reproduction of it. So that's going to generate the mechanical royalties. And then how those are divvied up is a whole nother breakdown.
Yeah, hopefully we can get a little into mechanicals, because mechanical royalties are really confusing. I'm confused by them, and I noticed too that a lot of musicians confuse mechanical royalties, which are based on a set rate. It's a law, right?
Yeah, so right now it's the 9.1 cents for the mechanical royalties, but that's for the the physical reproduction of the work and the digital download. That's where that applies. With streaming, that doesn't apply. So streaming, it's based off of a revenue share from the different streaming platforms. So Spotify will allocate, a percentage based on how much money they made, and then they'll pay out, royalties based on what their share is. So it is and it isn't based on, where it's coming from.
So that's why so many people have no idea what the real streaming payouts are.
Yeah, so like Spotify's rates that they're paying are going to be different than Apple Music, and Apple Music's going to be different than what Tidal's paying. Like, it's all based on those individual streaming platforms now.
And then it's also based on, from what I gather from what you just said, it's also based on how much something's getting streamed, when it's getting streamed, the artists involved.
Yeah, so yeah, obviously with Spotify and stuff, those rates will differ based on, is the person listening to Spotify on a premium account? Is it a college account? Is it a 14-day free trial? Is it a freemium account? All those are going to dictate the rate that's being paid, as well as where they're listening to the song. So to be able to really calculate what a per stream is nearly impossible, because Spotify has to tell us what that looks like. So that when we have a tool that allows you to kind of estimate that on our website, but even with that, we can only give a range, because we don't know who was listening to the song and what they were paying for the subscription. And then obviously month by month, Spotify changes their rates.
So who's collecting and monitoring performance royalties? Who's collecting and monitoring mechanical royalties?
So in the US, the PROs are going to be collecting the performance royalties. So BMI, ASCAP, CSAC, GMR. The mechanical royalties are being collected by the mechanical agencies. The main one is Harry Fox Agency. It gets abbreviated to HFA all the time. But there's also Music Reports, which is MRI. So those are the two main ones. There's also a third one, MediaNet. But they all have different relationships with the different streaming platforms. So HFA is collecting from Apple Music and from Spotify, so they're getting the bulk of that money for the licensing. So yeah, in order to collect those royalties, you need to have your work registered at all these different societies. And that's just the US. If you look outside the US, all these other countries have their own societies that your work also has to be there.
So then beyond that, what's the difference between a mechanical royalty and a royalty directly paid by, let's say, a record label signs you or purchases your beat and they're giving you royalty points per sale? What's the difference between those?
So when a label's paying out, it's not so much a royalty, it's really just the master recording revenue that's generated. So if your music's being released through a label, it's actually the label's responsibility to collect the mechanical share for the consumption of that music for like digital downloads, and then they're supposed to pay out those mechanicals to the songwriters that are attributed to it. If you self-release your music through like DistroKid or CD Baby, all the money for the digital download is going to be sent directly to the uploader on the platform, and then it's technically their responsibility to then divvy up that money for the mechanicals to the songwriters. So it can go in a lot of places based on what your circumstances are.
Because I think a lot of people get mechanicals and those types of royalties confused, and they think they're completely one and the same.
Yeah, they're definitely different, especially with streaming. I mean, if your work is not registered here in the US with HFA at least, you're missing out on a huge chunk of your mechanical royalties.
So here's the elephant in the room. Why do you think royalty collection is so confusing and convoluted?
It's an archaic system that they built. So with publishing, it's these multiple old societies that have been around for hundreds of years that are collecting the royalties generated for the publishing. And they haven't really kept up with technology the same way that the streaming platforms are coming out with it. And the streaming platforms and the distributors aren't required to provide the publishing information to like Spotify, for example. That's why when you see like these big songs, you'll check like the songwriting credits, and sometimes there'll be no information listed there. So they're not required to have it. So it makes it really hard to connect the data points. So if you think of publishing, it's basically just a big network of metadata. And if we don't have that metadata on all these different platforms, and there's not one body entity that's taking care of all this, it becomes very hard to connect all the dots unless you have someone, doing it on your behalf and making sure that the data is at all these places.
And that's a big part of what the benefit of Song Trust is, right?
Yeah, and that's exactly what we do. We basically have a network of direct affiliations to all these different societies throughout the world. So once a song is released, you can put that song onto the Song Trust platform with the writer split information, and then we'll package that data with your songwriter information, and then you can directly pull in any Spotify information through the platform, and we'll grab additional metadata, package it together. And then we're going to register all that information at all these different societies. So if someone is streaming your song in the UK, the UK society, which is PRS and MCPS, they're going to be collecting the money. And now they know, because we've registered your data there, they know that song and that royalty belongs to that portion of data, and they'll send it back to Song Trust.
There are a lot of resources on the Song Trust website that explains the differences between these royalty types, correct?
Yeah, so one of the main pillars of our business is really education. I mean, we can't get people to sign up and use our service if they don't understand the fundamentals of publishing. So we're constantly trying to, provide resources. We have an ebook, we have a crash course, we have a help center and a knowledge center that we allow people to do a lot of self-education to try to understand it better, and we try to, make it as ingestible as possible. But it is a confusing side of the business. So I always tell people not to be discouraged if you don't get it right away, but it is worth knowing.
Are those resources free to the public?
Yeah, everything is absolutely free in terms of resources.
So they just go to songtrust.com and search for how would they find that stuff?
Yeah, so there's a knowledge center under one of the navigations, and you can just go right in. There's also the blog I would check out. Signing up for our newsletter, they're always posting the new articles that we do. We'll have guest writers come on to specialize in YouTube royalties and specialize into all these different little micro areas of the industry to help explain them more thoroughly. But we post everything that we've written onto the blog, and so it's a great resource.
So which royalties are collected by Songtrust?
So Songtrust is collecting all of the publishing royalties. So there's the two main copyrights. There's the master recording copyright and the composition copyrights. The master recording is usually is handled primarily by the distributor, the label, and then Songtrust is collecting everything on the composition.
And so that includes mechanical royalties, that includes performance royalties.
Exactly.
What else am I missing? The micro syncs, that includes.
Yeah, so microsync will collect the publisher's share of YouTube video microsyncs.
Okay, got it. So if you're a member of Songtrust, this is a question I see all the time. Do you still need to be a member of a PRO like ASCAP or BMI, and do you still need to be a member of HFA?
So every songwriter needs to be associated with at least one society, preferably their home territory. What that does is it assigns what's called an IPI number, and that IPI number is basically a unique identifier for a songwriter within the publishing community. If you're not with BMI or ASCAP, we can actually affiliate you directly through our platform and waive any of the fees that are associated, so we can facilitate that process for you so you don't have to go to other places. But once we have that data and you have the affiliation, you wouldn't need to register at any other societies throughout the world because we'll be acting as the publisher, connecting you to all those places.